Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
After a busy night in Brussels, the UK and the EU have at last reached an agreement on 3 key areas of Brexit, which will enable talks to move into their second phase.
That's right. After negotiations into the small hours of the morning, Theresa May and Jean-Claude Juncker announced significant progress on the 3 main areas of the deal, which includes a payment of up to £39 billion to the EU.
We've been working extremely hard this week, and as you've all seen, it hasn't been easy for either side. When we met on Monday, we said a deal was within reach. What we have arrived at today represents a significant improvement, and I'm grateful to the negotiating teams, led by David Davis and Michel Barnier, for their efforts. Getting to this point has required give and take on both sides. And I believe that the joint report being published is in the best interests of the whole of the UK. I very much welcome the prospect of moving ahead to the next phase, to talk about trade and security, and to discuss the positive and ambitious future relationship that is in all of our interests. The deal we've struck will guarantee the rights of more than 3 million EU citizens living in the UK and of 1 million UK citizens living in the EU. EU citizens living in the UK will have their rights enshrined in UK law and enforced by British courts. They will be able to go on living their lives as before. I was clear in Florence that we're a country that honours our obligations. After some tough conversations, we've now agreed a settlement that is fair to the British taxpayer. It means that in future we will be able to invest more in our priorities at home, such as housing, schools and the NHS. In Northern Ireland, we will guarantee there will be no hard border, and we will uphold the Belfast Agreement. Millions of jobs depend on the future trading relationship we will determine, and I'm optimistic about the discussions ahead.
Today's result is, of course, a compromise. It is the result of a long and intense discussion between the Commission negotiators and those of the UK. On the basis of the mandate which was given to me by the European Council, the Commission has just formally decided to recommend to the European Council that sufficient progress has now been made on the strict terms of the divorce.
So what has exactly been agreed? Well, there were 3 main issues, of course: the Irish border, EU citizens' rights and the Brexit divorce bill. Firstly, the report says that there will be no hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. If an agreement can't be reached, then the UK will maintain full alignment with the rules of the single market and customs union. And in a concession to the DUP, the report also says that there will be no regulatory barriers that will be introduced between Northern Ireland and the UK, that is, unless agreed by the Northern Ireland Executive and Assembly. The deal has guaranteed the rights as well of 3 million EU citizens in the UK and will also secure the rights of UK citizens living in the EU. As part of the agreement, the European Courts of Justice will, in particular cases, continue to have a role in overseeing the rights of EU citizens in the UK for 8 years after our departure. And finally, the methodology for the working out of the Brexit divorce bill has been agreed on, with the exact figure thought to be between £35 million and £39 billion. The UK will continue to contribute to the EU budget as if it was still a member until the end of 2020.
Should we have a day off Brexit? You'll be lucky. This is a good day, isn't it? In the sense that the absolute madness of going away without any deal whatsoever, or believing the absolute lunatics who were arguing that no deal is better than a bad deal, appear to have been put back in their box by Theresa May. So you can expect from sort of pretend politicians and racist liars, you can expect a narrative of betrayal and nonsense and humiliation, call it whatever you will, but that's because they can continue to deny reality. Theresa May, since becoming Prime Minister, and even more so since messing up that general election in June, Theresa May has known all along that reality has to bite at some point, and that point would appear to be now. So even troublemakers and dissemblers like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove are coming behind a deal that is rubbish, but better than no deal at all. So here's the simple breakdown, okay? No deal is national suicide. We'd survive. We wouldn't actually sink beneath the waves, but we would be a diminished country with a sort of ludicrously overinflated view of our own standing on the world stage that reality would very, very, very quickly render ridiculous. That's a given. You might still disagree with that, but I'm afraid today is one of those days when you just have to suck it up. The idea of leaving with nothing in place, a hard border in Ireland or a border at the Irish Sea, whatever it may be, and that's still not clear. Theresa May has finally behaved in a way that acknowledges just how insane that would be. So any deal is better than no deal, okay? But what we still have, and this is why today will break down into a sense of anticlimax for disappointed Brexiters and a sense of pointless tragedy for rational Remainers. What we still have is a failure to acknowledge, and I think today probably means we never will acknowledge properly that there is no deal at all that is better than continuing membership. That's actually the end of the analysis for today. So I'm going to go home and I'm going to play some Mantovani records until 1 o'clock. No deal, okay? No available deal, as in no reasonable deal, no existing, no possible, that's the word we want. No possible deal is better than remaining in the European Union, but any deal at all is better than having no deal at all. Discuss. Phone lines are open, 0345 60 60973. There is no pleasure in being proved right on these occasions, but there was no real way that this could unfold differently in the context of paying the bill. And don't forget, we'll also continue to have subscriptions to pay for access to the market if we manage to achieve that. But in terms of paying the bill, it had to happen. Otherwise, we'd be setting ourselves up as a new arrival on the table of international trade with a whopping great black mark against our ratings record. It would say, literally, on our Airbnb reviews, you can't trust these guys. They'll sign deals with you and then they'll renege on what they were promising to pay. So we had to do that all along. The EU citizens, this is sad. If you are currently British and working in France, you automatically will lose the right to move as freely to other EU countries as all your other colleagues have. So highly skilled professionals or, lorry drivers. If you're based in a European Union country, you can stay there, but you can't, as I understand it, move to any others. That's very sad. You also, of course, have the surrendering of any influence at all on the rights and regulations which we will continue to abide by. So break it down whichever way you want. Here's what's happening today. Theresa May is trying to minimise the self-inflicted damage that this country has done. She decided, and I think probably rightly, although some of us still can't quite go all the way to this place with her, she decided that it was pointless waiting for fact to trump feelings. It was pointless waiting for analysis to trump emotion. It was never going to happen. This notion of the will of the people, this sort of furious media-led assault upon truth and objectivity is so complete in this country that Theresa May pragmatically concluded, and this is why I still have a begrudging, I know you're going to laugh, but this is why I still have a begrudging admiration for her. Whether or not she is the best person for the job, I don't know, but the job she has clearly identified is to minimise the self-inflicted damage that we're doing to ourselves, to make that damage as small as possible, while also trying to hold her own party together, because her party is, of course, riven with dissent and division, led chiefly by people who remain convinced that we can have our cake and eat it, that we're all going to get a unicorn next week, and that the sunny uplands are just around the corner. So very, very simply, Theresa May is acting out of a sense, dare I say, of patriotic duty, but it's a patriotic duty built upon this astonishing precept. I mean, truly breathtaking. This is why the rest of the world find what we're doing so baffling at the moment. It's built upon a precept, a preconception, that we have to do this stupid thing. Once you accept that we have to do this stupid thing, from a Remain perspective, it's pretty hard not to give Theresa May a gold star today. Albeit that she hasn't actually done anything except agree to everything the European Union has asked for. But what she's managed to do is frame it in such a way that it feels like leaving, while at the moment it is I mean, it's not really leaving. It's diminishing our status. It's removing some of our rights and freedoms. It's rendering, it's actually rendering mainland-born British people in Northern Ireland second-class citizens because they won't have the right to apply for an Irish passport and therefore enjoy full EU freedoms. It's probably going to see some form of customs union and single market regulation remain in place across all of the United Kingdom. As I understand it, these are things you can pick a hole in, of course. And you also have the, for me, the ridiculous notion that we have somehow regained control by giving it all to the body that will regulate the customs union and the single market. So the European Court of Justice or the European Commission or Europe, however you want to phrase it. Madness. Absolute madness. But weirdly, we said this yesterday, weirdly, rational people will now have to start moving towards the notion that because we're determined to do this stupid thing, we have to do it in the least stupid way possible. And that is pretty much, from my cursory reading of what's been agreed overnight, which is far from, I think as Leo Varadkar said, this is what did he say? It's the end of the beginning. It might also still prove to be the beginning of the end. But if we are hell-bent upon this path of self-harm, then Theresa May has seen herself and has cast herself in the role of damage limitation. And that's what we've seen happen overnight. Discuss. Phone lines are open. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I think that line from Michel Barnier is perhaps... See, even somebody like me, it's very hard to find people who are passionate about the European Union. And I'm far from passionate about the European Union. I wish I'd known more about it sooner. But even if you feel that leaving is increasingly, the evidence is that leaving is very, very silly and will damage our interests on almost every imaginable front. Even if you feel all of those things, you kind of have to recognise that what she's arranged is better than all of the alternatives except not leaving. So in the sort of litany of least bad options, retaining as much membership as possible while doing just enough leaving to convince the Brextremists that we're actually leaving, the ones that have to address reality, the ones that are elected parliamentarians, not the kind of gobs on sticks and newspaper columnists, the Goves and the Johnsons. They kind of have to be able to sell the idea that we're leaving when Theresa May is delivering a departure that is as little like leaving as possible. And then, I guess, you know, those of you who, like me, feel curiously desolate at the whole prospect have to try to draw some crumbs of comfort from this arrangement, from this deal, because it is nowhere near as bad as it could have been. I think that's where we'll start the conversation today. This is my suggestion to you. And I suspect today's not a day for polarity, actually. Nobody is going to think that this is brilliant. So what you've either got is a sense of anticlimax if you thought that we could somehow leave and redefine reality, and a sense of perhaps increasing sense of desolate inevitability, coupled with a degree of relief that we've avoided some of the daftest options. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. You will have had time to pick over some of the detail, just as I have had. I'd love to know if you've spotted anything that you think merits a slightly wider audience, and similarly, if you find fault in anything that I've just offered up, then let's examine together the question of who's right and who's wrong. But here's the deal, okay? We're paying tens of billions of pounds to remain in a regulatory system which we will have no right to influence or change, and simultaneously the citizens of these islands will have demonstrably fewer rights, freedoms and abilities than the citizens of the other 27 European Union countries. And we're going to pay money to bring that about. But because that spectre of no deal has hung over us now for the best part of a year, there's a little bit of relief on the part of people like me. I suppose, what could you compare it to? I suppose it's a bit like getting a slap around the chops as opposed to getting done in with a baseball bat. So seriously, if you were given a choice between a slap in the kisser and being mullered with a baseball bat, what would you choose? I know that there's a little voice in the back of your head saying, well, what about option 3, James, where nobody gets hurt at all? That's, sadly, Brextremists have successfully, I think, I could be wrong, I'd like to be wrong, but I just sense now that the prospect of no deal has moved further away, but so has the prospect of no leave. I think they've both moved further away as a result of this, not least because the European Union really is interested only in defending its own interests. And once they've accepted our intractability, their priority becomes protecting their own interests, which is why Theresa May has capitulated on every single demand that they have made. But as no deal moves further away, we feel a sense of relief. As no leave moves further away, we feel a sense of disappointment. But what everybody could agree on, perhaps, is that this is the least bad of several bad options. We're going to get a slap in the chops, self-inflicted, rather than smashing ourselves over the head with a baseball bat. I quite like that analogy. Oh, and by the way, David Davis is still in charge. It's 0345 6060 973. Here is the mother of all reality checks. In the absence of agreed solutions, the United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with the rules of the internal market and the customs union. So we leave, but we don't leave. And we pay for the privilege. But it's still better than the alternative. If you remove Remain from the table, which I think the media has probably successfully done, I don't know, people like Vince Cable keeping the dream alive. You remove Remain from the table, you're given choices. I think what we've done overnight, what Theresa May has agreed to, because there's no negotiation, it's the European Union saying, yes, it's this or nothing. She's agreed to it. It's probably the least bad available option, which is why one presumes that the absolute nut jobs will be going crazy. Discuss. Paul is in Windsor. Paul, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. I'm a big Remainer, campaigned with the Remain campaign, and I'm really excited actually about what's happened today, because what you've said is all along has been true. It's reality has come home. There was no way that the Northern Ireland border could be issue could be square, circle could be square.
Yeah, but they've kicked that down the road, haven't they? That line there, I was just realising as I read it, this in the absence of agreed solutions, it still keeps the notion alive that there is a solution to the Irish border issue that can accommodate the Good Friday Agreement, and there isn't. So she's still got that bomb is still ticking, if you pardon the pun.
Yes, I agree with you. I think the operative word in there is agreed.
Yes.
So the EU have to sign it off, and I think that will be, you'll have to build it, test it, improve the concept. And by the way, for exporters, that is going to be hugely bureaucratic, because you'll have to log all your exports and.
But that's probably never going to happen. So when you say you're excited today, you mean your relief is so great that it feels like excitement?
Well, I'm putting a couple of dots together here. I think that we're going to stay in the customs union and the single market in all but name. I think that's obvious, and everybody can see that. I think if you listen to what Martin Schulz said the other day about federal. This
is the fellow that could be the deputy leader of Germany who had a bit of a fit on Twitter talking about how it's going to be completely federal. Any country that doesn't join will be expelled. Thank God he hasn't got his hands on the steering wheel.
Well, I agree with him, but at the same time, he's not stupid. He was the president of the European Parliament for 5 years, and he wouldn't say something like that unless there was some kind of substance about it. Now, what I'm thinking that there's a possibility here that Europe is actually going to move to two-tier. I think the one-size-fits-all Europe has certainly not worked for the UK, and it's certainly not worked for Germany and Holland and Belgium and all the smaller countries that really want to get on and have closer integration, because the euro has really struggled with it. There have been fiscal and banking integration. So I think that what may well happen is there may well now be a debate within the European Union that says, okay, we're going to get these countries, you can get closer and more integrated and move towards a federal model. And then the other countries who don't want to be part of that, you can all sit outside.
And what countries would they be?
Well, you're looking at countries that aren't in the euro for a start. So that would be Denmark, Poland, anybody really that's not inside the euro, or countries that are in the euro.
So we'd be with Denmark and Poland.
That's what I think is going to come out of this. That's what I think will come out of this. Now, whether you call that EFTA or you call that the EEA...
Like an enhanced EEA, but they all, of course, would be subject to freedom of movement. And I don't want to start at the end already, but everything's going to come back to that because of the Brextremist position, that it's all about immigration.
I think it will come back to freedom of movement, and I predict as well that there will be some kind of a change in the European Union around freedom of movement.
I think you're wrong on that. I really do. I think it's become less likely. I think that because of the ignorance regarding the rules that were already in place. I think Amber Rudd's already making noises about, during the transition period, not having the same freedom of movement that we have now by using the European Union regulations that have been in place for over a decade, the ones that are already used in Belgium. That with respect, that I think is the biggest misconception in the whole pudding, is the idea that we couldn't have had a 3-month trial period for anyone coming here looking for work. We couldn't have checked out their bank balance, made sure people had the means to support them. The text is there. It's in black and white.
Well, that's because we're generally a laissez-faire country.
But we can't. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because you're right in a way. We were laissez-faire with regard to using the border controls that the European Union that we have written as members of the European Union. We were laissez-faire about imposing them, but we were the opposite of laissez-faire about complaining about it. That's the curious. That is the nugget of most surrealism about the whole process, is just how much prominence was given to so-called border control without anybody explaining or apparently understanding. And I was guilty of this myself, I think, although I can't quite remember. I'm pretty sure I wasn't clear about this until after the vote. The rules make it perfectly clear that control over who can and can't come here in search of work is not only possible, but practiced by other countries. Paul, thank you. Remember, if you're trying and failing to get through, as I bid farewell to Paul, the number you need is 0345 60 60973. The question is, and this is nice in a way, because it spares us the binary nature of so much Brexit debate. This is, in a way, a sense of grim relief for Remainers who were worried that the Brextremist lobby may take us ever further into ludicrous oblivion. But equally, it's a sense of anticlimax for those Brextremists. It's not going to please anybody, but it's the least bad available option under the acceptance that leaving is inevitable. I think Vince Cable said something to Nick about it taking about 100 years to sort out the Irish border question, and until the Irish border question is sorted out, we stay in the customs union and the single market. So our trading is going to be impacted less badly than was possible, but of course our freedoms to move around the place, out of the 28 countries currently in the European Union, we will be a very, very distant 28th, and the other 27 will be first equal. Which is just daft, but, I guess reality has to be managed, doesn't it? Expectations have to be managed as reality bites ever deeper. Steve's in Oxford. Steve, what would you like to say?
Yeah, morning, James. First-time caller. Been listening to your show just for a couple of months. I find it a bit addictive, actually. So,
that's the spirit, mate. That's the spirit. No, you can get gum. If it gets too much, you can get gum in boots. I can write you a prescription.
No, what I'm a bit curious to know is are we going to get anything written in this deal that says that the EU will not put a hard border between the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland at some point in the future, be it 5 or 10 years' time?
No.
Because, yeah.
I think that's the point.
What I was thinking. Because, nobody in the UK wants
until there is an agreed solution.
Yeah.
The United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with the rules of the internal market and the customs union.
We're out of the EU and past the transition phase and all that up. At some point down the line in the future, how would we have the power to stop the EU from putting a hard border on the borderline of the Republic of Ireland between Northern Ireland?
Because they have said that they would only do that if there was divergence with the rules of the internal market and the customs union. They'd never do it. I don't know whether they're contractually obliged, but they would never do it as long as that alignment was in place, and they've pledged to keep that alignment in place.
Yeah, okay. Well, hate to come in with such a negative note early on.
No, it's not negative. I mean, to be honest, I'm uncomfortable being the kind of, phone a friend on this, because I'm processing the information as quickly as you are, but I'm a bit more anarchy because I do it for a living, and you, lucky you don't. But no, there's no...
I don't know a huge amount about politics.
No, this has killed off... it's not signed and sealed, but as it stands, the text of this proposal has killed off the prospect of a hard border in Ireland. But what it's also done is extend the rules of the internal market and the customs union to the whole of the United Kingdom, while also accepting that the final arbitration on any of those rules and regulations. So if we, as the United Kingdom, disagree with the European Union on what these rules and regulations mean or how they should be interpreted, and this is the bit that is going to be very hard for Brextremists to swallow, then the final court of arbitration on that will be the European Court of Justice. So we remain essentially under their jurisdiction, although I think they're already trying to sell that as, it'll only be 2 or 3 cases a year.
Yeah, well, I just think it'll be interesting to see what happens in the future, quite a few years down the line.
Can't argue with that, Stephen. I cannot argue with that. It will be very interesting to see what happens in the future. Remember, as I bid farewell to Steve, if you're failing and struggling to get through, there's a phone line free briefly as we wave goodbye to one caller and make room for another. 0345 606 0973. There's the line. There's the line that I think it all boils down to. In the absence of agreed solutions, the United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with the rules of the internal market and the customs union. What that means for freedom of movement, I don't know at this point. But just looking at it now, the rules of the internal market and the customs union include? No, surely not. Who's in the customs union or the internal market and not in the European Union at the moment? Is there anyone? Is that Norway and Switzerland? And they have freedom of movement? No, they can't. Someone else would have spotted that sooner. I must be barking up the wrong tree. It's 10:30. And we continue to suggest cautiously that this is the least bad of a load of bad options. Lots of confusion around, even from some of my colleagues on Twitter. To be absolutely clear, if you are a citizen of Northern Ireland, I'm not quite clear on whether this is a birthright, whether you have to have been born there or merely live there, then under the terms of the Good Friday Agreement, you can apply for an Irish passport, which means that a kid born in Belfast today will have more, or not today because we're still in, will have more rights, if you like, internationally than a kid born in Birmingham after we leave. So Northern Irish people can apply for Irish passports, and of course we can't. That being an Irish passport that would involve EU citizenship. And the second thing is the part on citizens' rights, which emphasises one country. You will only be able to continue to live as an EU citizen in the country where you currently reside. I'm pretty clear that that's what it says, but some people are less clear, so it's possible that we need a little bit more clarity there. The bit that specifies frontier workers is different. Frontier workers get a special dispensation, but if you want to move your permanent residence from one European Union country to another, you're probably going to have to find some sort of way of getting dual nationality. As it stands, and that I think is pretty clear, but some people apparently are confused. Ian is in Bridgnorth. Ian, what would you like to say?
Yes, morning, James. I'm glad, as a whole, that we're actually making some sort of progress on getting a little bit ahead now. The 40 billion...
Progress towards where?
Towards actually... proper dialogue. At the moment, I thought, the last few months has been spent in sort of one side saying something else, somebody else going another way. There seems to be, at the moment...
We've done everything the European Union told us to do, every single thing.
Yeah.
It's not really dialogue, is it?
Which is where I'm now going to come on to, basically. Yeah. It's moving ahead, and we can actually see now which way they want us to go. And that was not been really there. So my worry is...
It's been there since they published, since we agreed to sequencing. We've been clear on what they want. I've just got the number in, actually, of how much it's going to cost. Do you want to have a guess?
Well, I've been saying 40 billion. They wanted 100 billion, so I'll go for 55.
35 to 39 billion at the moment is what we're going to pay to retain customs union and single market regulation whilst surrendering our right to influence it.
Yeah, at the moment, okay. But this is where my main point for...
Oh, and that's the pounds, because, of course, we'll pay it in euros, which means as the pound's performance continues to fall short of what it was doing before the referendum, we'll actually be paying more than we would have done if we hadn't voted to leave, if you see what I mean.
No, I do. And I said, this is what my point now is going to be, basically. The fact is that we're agreeing a lump sum of money to be handed across to the EU. But we've stated from today, haven't they, basically, that we're going to remain in alignment with the EU. Now, if that...
overseen by the European Court of Justice.
And this is the really scary thing now.
Why?
Because it's the European Union Court will then have an override say over us. But more importantly, of course, when we say we're going to go along the same roads as them, we then need to start thinking about, which is not being mentioned really anywhere in any of this, along the lines of PESCO and the EU Army And the fact of the matter is that our forces in this country are being decimated because really what they really want is they want an EU army.
Okay, we're going a little bit down the rabbit hole now, but I hear your point, and that's fine. I don't want to have I'd just like to ask you one question, because this will sound a bit glib, but it's a genuine area of bafflement to me, as so much of Brexit is. I've got quite good history. I did an A-level on Byzantine history, believe it or not, all the way back to Charlemagne and the Holy Roman Empire, and I'm pretty strong on the 19th century, and like most Brits, I'm well versed in the 20th century. Historically, the armies that countries should be most fearful of are not the armies that they're in, Ian. So just out of interest, very briefly, because a lot of people feel the same way you do, what is so chilling about the prospect of being in an even bigger army than the one we've got ourselves?
Okay, again, it's my next point. The thing is with that EU army will then be along the lines of who is actually going to make decisions where that army is used.
You mean like NATO?
Yeah. I mean, it's the thing at the moment. I mean, Boris Johnson is over at the moment with NATO and the EU commissioners.
So NATO's bad as well, is it?
No, it's not bad. What I'm saying is accountability. This is my main point, you see, James, is accountability.
And how will we have more say over that accountability by being out of the European Union than we would have if we were in it?
We can't be taking in our soldiers and everybody else, or for that matter, us as a whole society, cannot be taken into wars without us actually having a vote on it. Okay,
so when you talk about fears of an EU army, you're worried that people like us might be conscripted to fight a war that Britain doesn't want to fight by European Union overlords?
Not as in conscripted. I mean, literally, it's going through the right channels. I mean, our Parliament will say yes. We will send our troops to X, Y, or Z.
Yes.
Now, if they join the EU army and say we're in full alignment with them,
but it's they call it a common defence policy rather than an army. I think army's quite scary, but I did worry this was a bit of a rabbit hole. Just briefly again, can you think of a point in history where we've been damaged by armies we were in?
Well, we've never been in any other army, have we? At the end of the day,
you're joking, mate. You need to swat up on the Battle of Waterloo and the number of different nationalities that were under Wellington's command.
Yeah, but we were under our command, weren't they? I mean, that was the joys of.
So you're fine with a multinational army? You just want to be certain that there'll be a British general in charge?
No, I'm not. No, what I want to say is accountability. I want us to be able to say, yes, we're going here, and yes, we're going there.
Okay.
But at the same time, you can still work, as I said, as a partner with the EU, by all means. But it said it all boils down to accountability.
But the future you paint ain't ever going to happen if we retain our seat in the European Union and retain our power of veto. But anyway, as I said, it's a red herring. Not a red herring, it's a rabbit hole. We'll return to the question of the European common defence policy at some point subsequent to this. But I don't know actually what the reference would be. I think we've committed to retain our support of some of those European Union security agencies, to retain our sort of de facto membership. But again, the details are still emerging. Boyd's in Reading. Boyd, what would you like to say?
It's about the Northern Irish thing, James. I cannot see how a 12-year-old, 13-year-old and older Northern Irish citizen can basically apply for an Irish passport and get his EU citizenship when it's not available to people within the rest of Great Britain and United Kingdom. It just seems completely unaligned. If we're talking about alignment between Great Britain, Northern Ireland, surely this should be the case. I mean, Guy Verhofstadt many months ago said, why can't British people who want to be an EU citizen pay a fee?
Gosh. Do you think that's come closer into view then? Because if they're serious, I don't know enough about Northern Irish politics, to my embarrassment. Luckily, I've got a switchboard in front of me full of people potentially who know.
Anyone born.
No, I know that. That's a requirement of the Good Friday Agreement, and I don't know whether I misspoke, but that remains. That everybody who is in that criteria and in Northern Ireland can apply right now for an Irish passport, and then when Brexit is finally over, they'll still be EU citizens even though they're living in the United Kingdom, and that privilege is not extended to anybody else in the United Kingdom.
why is this not extended? Because everybody has unique circumstances. We're talking about...
Oh, mate, this how long? What time is it? 10:43, and it's beginning to unravel, isn't it? Because I want that right as well. Why the hell should I not have that right when people born in Belfast have got it? Yes.
Eva Hofstad said this. Look, he's very keen on people being able to pay a fee. Now, I don't mind paying £100, £200. My children are dual nationality. They went out and they got their French passports as soon as possible because, A, they can go to university free in the European Union, and B, if there's a company in Barcelona that says I want to employ my son or my daughter versus an English person that doesn't have EU citizenship, who is going to be in an advantageous position?
Your children are.
Absolutely. Now, I'm still fighting this Brexit. My local MP, who happens to be the housing minister, Alok Sharma,
yes,
he will not even come to the door to speak to me about this because he's scared.
Did you see that letter the other day from another one of them who wrote to a constituent and said we can't pull back because it would be a national embarrassment, so we're going to carry on with this idea because it's better than being embarrassed?
Well, they don't know. I mean, if you didn't do your homework like David Davis at school, you would not just get a detention, you would be expelled. It is unbelievable that there is nothing being done about this. Now, Alok Sharma has a Swedish wife. He says to me, I'm in exactly the same position as you, blah, blah, blah. You're not, Alok. And I tell you why. My wife is a teacher. She has a CAPES, which is an MSc, an MA, a BA, and all the rest of it. It's very difficult to become a teacher in France, have very high-level qualifications. Her qualifications may not be reciprocated. They may not be recognised in this country. So you can say as much as you want, the government, about you can stay and all the rest of it, unless the deal is done now that says your qualifications are recognised. Teachers, nurses, doctors, all those people have professional qualifications which are required for them to work in the UK. They have no satisfaction and comfort yet of staying here. So this is, not only is this a pantomime was spoken about on Question Time last night,
yes,
these are real people not having the rights to stay and work in the UK at the moment. And my rights as an English person, I don't have the right to be an EU citizen. I want to be able to be an EU citizen. It's been taken away from me, but for Northern Irish people over the age of 12, it hasn't. My circumstances are as unique as those people in Ireland, and this should be sorted out.
I can't argue with any of that, although obviously I'm going to leave the phone lines open for people who want to. Boyd, and I'm sorry you can't. I'm sorry you have to come here in order to hopefully in some way have your comments.
Well, I will continue with my Alok Sharma.
Well, that's what I mean. But I'll continue to provide you with a letterbox you can shout through if he carries on refusing to come to the door. That's all right. You mind how you go. And he's right, you know. And then these are the wrinkles. This is what taking back control looks like. Letting people who over the age of 12 in Northern Ireland all can remain EU citizens, but your children can't. Oh, that's right. I don't want them to. I don't want my children to have freedoms. I don't want my children to be able to go and work in other countries or move to Barcelona if they fall in love with a Spanish fella. I don't want my children to... Why would I want my children to have freedoms? God, what sort of communist are you? I just always hesitate to conduct sort of contretemps with colleagues or fellow presenters when they're not here. But Ian Dale's tweeted about me. And I like Ian a lot, and I appreciate a lot of people on his side of the argument are going to be struggling to process today's information. I'm not saying that people I'm saying the opposite of what he's claimed. I just want to clarify this, because I think we both respect our listeners and don't like confusion. The people in Northern Ireland, I think over the age of 12, so born after 2005, before 2005, can all apply for Irish passports, which involves getting EU citizenship. That's just true. And the terms and conditions for UK citizens living in a European Union country, with some dispensations for so-called frontier workers, people who cross a border every day to work, they're going to be tied to a host country. I read that as well. So just to clarify, but not to sort of have fisticuffs. It's a little bit unhelpful, although I suppose it's very much of our times. To clarify, the two biggest lines here are very simply the fact that in the absence of an agreement on Ireland, and there can't be an agreement on Ireland that accommodates the Good Friday Agreement, without leaving customs union and single market rules in place. So we're going to stay in the customs union and in the single market. It's interesting. And now Theo Ushwood is about to tell us we get an idea of how much it's going to cost as well.
It's going to cost, according to British sources, I've been speaking to them this morning, between 35 and 39 billion pounds. Now, if I can just give you where that money is coming from. To start with, you're looking at around 15 billion pounds on current contributions that we've contributed to for the short term. We've already pledged to for the short term.
Those are our commitments.
That's to the end of That's the end of the transition period in 2021.
Right.
Then you've got another 20 billion or so in terms of long-term projects on top of that.
So again, previous commitments that we retained.
But those are long-term projects.
2021.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then on top of that, and this is a number that hasn't actually been defined because it can't be defined, is pensions.
35 and then 14. So 14, 35. So around the 4 billion, between 0 and 4 billion on pensions.
Yeah.
4 billion.
No. That could even go beyond. That could go beyond the number, and of course the exchange rate comes.
People are going to live.
Yeah, exactly, and the exchange rate could be could vary that amount.
The ones with dignity, the pro-leave MEPs with any integrity will decline their pensions, won't they? Are there any with integrity? Hannan's got integrity, hasn't he? He's suggesting today that living under the customs union rules would be a bit like letting Americans come here with a right to bear arms. I think he's relaunching a new career as a stand-up comedian.
I'm gonna.
No, you can't complain for years about the European Union taking money out of the British Treasury, incorrectly in my view, but if that's been your position, you can't then take your pension, surely, unless you're going to admit that you're a complete charlatan.
I can't. I wouldn't want to answer that question, Jez. I know where you're leading me with that.
What do we get for 39 billion quid? Does this mean do we now not have to pay them any more money if we want to retain customs union membership and single market membership? Do we get that for free?
But if you look at the paragraph 49 of the 15-page
I'm looking at
agreement.
It now.
Yeah. So, in the absence of agreed solutions, the United Kingdom will maintain full alignment with those rules of the internal market and the customs union, which now or in the future support North-South cooperation, that's on Northern Ireland, the all-island economy, and the protection of the 1998 agreements.
CFA, yeah.
That's the key bit. So, in effect, unless we can find a way of separating ourselves from full alignment without bringing into jeopardy the Good Friday Peace Agreement, without imposing any type of infrastructure, which, of course, Leo Varadkar, the Irish Taoiseach, says cannot be done, then that's the default position.
And I can't see how anything can be done.
Well, they've had a go and they haven't got there yet.
Well, you can't get there yet. Isn't this the red line? I mean, the idea that you can... Because the Good Friday Agreement stipulates that both sides of the border have to dance to exactly the same tune. That's the best way of putting it.
Absolutely.
And if they are dancing on the Irish side of the border to the European Union's tune, then Northern Ireland has to dance to the European Union's trade-based tune and regulations. And if Northern Ireland does, after What's the Chops is Arlene Foster's intervention last week, then that's when Scotland and Wales and even London came forward and said, well, hang on a minute, if they can hang on to this customs union status, then so must we. Where does freedom of movement play into this?
Well, freedom of movement, of course, the Republic of Ireland is outside of Schengen. So, as a European Union citizen, you can fly into Dublin. You could take a train then to Belfast, and because there can't be any passport checks, there is, of course, identity checks to make sure you're allowed to go on an aeroplane. You can then fly from Belfast to the mainland Britain. So you can't...
No, but in terms of customs union and single market membership, I'm trying to think of a country that's in the customs union but not in the European Union that doesn't subscribe to full freedom of movement rules. It could be that I've just gone a bit down the rabbit hole myself on this one, but they're talking about Norway Plus or Switzerland. They both have freedom of movement. I think they're in Schengen.
Yes. Norway's in Schengen. So how can we have this customs union single... This is obviously for the transition period, we'll still have freedom of movement. Yes. But after that, if they're going to have customs union regulation overseen by the European Court of Justice until this sunset clause kicks in, but that's even more confusing, then as long as there is no hard border in Ireland, I can't see how we can
resist freedom of movement, and that's going to make heads explode. Even I have a little bit of sympathy for the immigration obsessives who might be even seeing that disappear over the horizon.
But what has been talked about previously in terms of the customs union, and this also applies to this would also apply to freedom of movement, is that checks are done in country. So you can travel to the UK. And then you have the issue of getting a job.
Yes.
And that's where the checks would be done.
Which we already had the right to do.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but we just chose not to.
Yes.
For subsequent... but what's the best news today, in your opinion? I know you're not really supposed to do opinions.
Yeah.
Who will be apart from Remainers who are relieved that we haven't gone completely nuts, who's going to actually be pleased today? Who's going to be going, yes?
I think Theresa May will be pleased.
Yeah, but then she's a Remainer who's relieved that we haven't gone completely nuts, mate. So she's not includable in this category. Who on the Leave side of the debate? Have you seen what's that funny fella called with the diamond, the anti-elitist with the diamond mines?
Aaron Banks. He's furious.
Well, he's talking about.
Aaron Banks is livid.
But this, I mean, who cares? But this reference to Ted Heath in this tweet, is this a real tweet that I've seen?
Yes, it's right. It's the statement said. Do you want to?
Yeah, just read. I mean, this is what I mean. These are the people that they won.
Yeah, they won. They lost today.
Read that tweet out.
They lost.
So who's celebrating today? From the Leave side of the debate.
Well, the people. I think the Leave side of the debate, and Boris Johnson has done it. Michael Gove has done it,
But we're staying in the customs union.
Well, in their view, Theresa May's been clear that we're not staying in the customs union and we're not staying in the single market. It's about presentation as well, James.
Are we just going to change the word slightly and hope they don't notice? We are, aren't we? So we're not staying in the customs union. Oh, no. We're leaving the customs union, but what we're going to do instead, we're going to create a union of customs. And we're going to stay in what we're going to do, we're going to join a new body called a Union of Customs, but we're definitely leaving the customs union. And also a market of singularity, but not a single market.
It's about making things true.
Yes.
So where are you having lunch today?
None of your business. Stop stalking.
No. Just where are you having lunch today? It's a serious question.
Probably Pret a Manger. Maybe Francomanca. Depends. I have to check my bank account.
But what happens if you wanted to go to Nando's and I said you should be having lunch in Nando's?
I'd say I'd go where I jolly well want.
But you need to have lunch in Nando's.
But I want to go to Francomanca.
But you need to have lunch in Nando's.
Is anyone following this?
Yes.
Oh.
Just go and have lunch in Nando's.
Okay.
Make it true.
I'll go and have lunch.
Make it true.
Oh, I wanted to have lunch in Nando's all along.
Yes.
You're good.
Yes, do you want that statement quickly?
Yeah, go on. So this is one of the men that bankrolled the Leave campaign.
It's confirmed Theresa May has betrayed the country and 17.4 million Leave voters. The traitorous, lily-livered embarrassment of a Prime Minister has just overseen the biggest sellout of this country since...
You can say that.
Can I say that?
Yeah, I think you should.
Pedo Ted signed up to the European project...
Pedo Ted. This is one of the key funders of the Brexit campaign, demonstrating his commitment to this country and its democratic norms.
Yeah.
Thank you, Theo Ashford. Are you going to come back today?
If I'm invited.
I'm still a bit confused about where I'm going for lunch.
Nando's.
But I always wanted to go to Nando's. Why have we even had an argument? You should see my inbox. That is literally what a small sort of... It's about 10 to 15% of my inbox is like. Now, it is... We wanted to go to Nando's all along. Fish. It's coming up too. It's just gone 11 o'clock. Guess what? We might continue with this conversation. What question are we asking? Who's happy? 0345 60973. And is there anything in this... I'm confused about freedom of movement, actually, so maybe someone else can shine some light. And what is the question? To leave or not to leave? That is not the question anymore. I don't think it is. Some of you are cross with me for suggesting that we've given up. But I think that two things have happened. No deal, which would be disastrous, whatever these clowns may claim, has moved possibly out of reach, certainly a lot further away. But so has no leave. Because this suggests to me that Brexit is going to be about as soft as is humanly possible. The only area of confusion for me at the moment, that's not true. There's millions of areas of confusion. The key area of confusion for me at the moment is going to be freedom of movement. I don't know if anything's been established on that or whether or not that's subject to the talks, but retaining customs union and single market regulations is our choice. We can do that, can't we? But it seems a very odd thing to do without the other freedoms that the European Union membership affords. 6 minutes after 11 is the time. Sean is in Belfast, so not a bad day for you lot, actually, Sean, all told.
Well, it's not too bad. I was in Belfast this morning. I was down to visit my family in Armagh, and I'm just actually at the back gardens, and I'm overlooking the Irish border, and it's basically through the through the back field. I think there's 2 or 3 cows actually sitting at the moment, so it really is amazing the fact that something like the border has actually got that on the international stage, which I think is very, very important.
Yes, I just have some breaking news I have to bring to your attention. That you're going to think I'm joking, or you're going to think that the EU is trolling Brexit. The EU has just agreed a trade deal with Japan, it's been reported.
Well, that's good. That's a good. Everything may be moving in the right direction.
It's good for them, mate. It makes beggar all difference to us.
Well, perhaps that we were saying this morning on the Twitter feeds that today or this morning's agreement, which is Friday's agreement, is Monday's agreement for slow learners with Christmas baubles, as we sort of say in the Twitterati over here. And that the bottom line is that the Good Friday Agreement has perhaps delivered for the UK as a whole a softer Brexit. And if you stick.
But this is why I'm asking who on the Leave side is going to be happy, because I found it increasingly difficult to find what you would call moderate Leavers, because even the ones that appeared to be moderate, the more you scratch, one of them ended up telling me that poor people in the north of England would have to sleep rough on the streets of big cities in order to undergo some sort of economic regeneration. And others essentially boiled down to xenophobia the more that you pushed. So in terms of doing it so that we can retain sovereign... Well, I can't even remember. Are we more or less sovereign under this soft Brexit, do you think?
Well, I think for Ireland and for the north of Ireland in particular, we do have the Good Friday Agreement, which states in it that at the moment, for the time being, according to the Good Friday Agreement, that the British government is... the north of Ireland is an integral part of the UK. But really, the Good Friday Agreement is sovereign in the north of Ireland.
Yeah. And this is where the rest of the country really embarrassed itself by just not knowing. I know we don't take enough interest in Northern Irish matters unless there's blood being spilt on the streets of the mainland, but it was astonishing, the levels of ignorance. Peter Bone was on the telly yesterday talking undiluted gibberish and going largely unchallenged.
I was listening to the likes of Owen Patterson and Ian Duncan Smith talking about Duncan Smith going and Owen's going, I've been over to Ireland once every month and I'm this. I said, Owen, I live here. You fly in, you fly out. We, the real people who live here, know what's going on. The talk of a border was highly, highly dangerous. These Brexiteers were crowbarring the Good Friday Agreement. They were opening Pandora's box, and that was stopped. Now, let's hope it has been stopped, because this whole document is still contradictory in so many, many ways, but it's a treaty. It's an international treaty, and the Germans and the French and the Europeans, they love their treaties. And you cannot deviate from these treaties. So you've noticed all those points, they all have to be compliant to the Good Friday Agreement. That is essential.
And how? I mean, because I've been embarked over the last 18 months on a curiously dizzying journey of surreal experience, but I haven't actually been directly affected much yet, apart from going on holiday and my money not going quite as far in the Eurozone as it would have done previously. But that's nothing. In Northern Ireland, presumably, as you've looked at our elected, not just sort of weird backbenchers or kind of fringe MEPs, but senior members of the Conservative and Unionist Party. That's where it really gets comical. This is the point at which a script editor would say, don't be daft, no one's going to buy this. I mean, senior members of the Conservative Unionist Party having absolutely no understanding of the Good Friday Agreement.
That is the frightening thing. The Good Friday Agreement, we all were delivered the Good Friday Agreement in 1998. Every household got one. I have one always in my office, and I always use it as a general reference. But people have got to realise that David Cameron did say, and I remember him saying, he said, mad, swivel-eyed loons. And he was right in many ways, because the Brexiteers and the hard right in England, basically, to get their own way, was going to have to dismantle the Good Friday Agreement. And what the Good Friday Agreement has done is it's actually perhaps saved.
I think it has. I think the Good Friday Agreement has saved the United Kingdom from smashing itself over the head with a baseball bat and allowed us to somehow support the notion of just punching ourselves in the face quite hard.
I couldn't disagree with you at all.
11 in. Go on.
Passport thing. You're asking about the passport thing is very important.
Yes.
the idea that people say, well, I mean, we in Ireland, we've got the grandfather clause and the grandmother clause. And another thing is that, I mean, the Irish football team, I mean, most of them are born in England, actually.
We need Jackie Charlton to be in charge of citizenship.
Incredible that. But the good thing is that's the wonderful relationship that we must keep between Ireland and the rest of the UK. I mean, we do. I mean, I studied over there. I mean, it was one of the greatest experiences living in England, working in Manchester, I worked in media there. So most of the people over there are super duper people, and they don't all represent these swivel-eyed loons that the world may see some of them as, but they're not. So my point is that passport, if you've got a grandparent or you've got a grandmother, you're entitled to an Irish passport right away. So, and what's that? England's got like 8.1 million people can claim Irish descent. Maybe not all grandparent ways, but there's a good few million people in the UK that can access an Irish passport. And there has been something like that.
I know. I think adopted lads. I think adopted people can as well. I think there's a dispensation.
One too, do you know?
Yeah. I tell you what, mate. Let's have a pint together when it's all sorted, all done and dusted. Could be good. Lee is in Croydon. Lee, what would you like to say?
Yeah, good morning, James.
Hello,
the point made about are you happy today or are you not happy? I'm happy that we're actually leaving, that it's going through now, but I am not happy because obviously it's 40 billion pounds we're paying.
Let me read you a tweet from September the 21st of this year from one of my favourite listeners, Incorrigible FCA. After the phony war, we are finally getting down to brass tacks. UK says 20 billion, they say 100 billion, 40 billion pounds is where the smart money is. It shouldn't have come as a surprise to anyone who listens to this programme.
No. The surprise is that people don't actually realise what that's for. It's not them just being nasty and saying, it's a divorce settlement or whatever. Because if it is, I want half the buildings that we paid for that are in Europe and everything.
No, but that doesn't make sense because everybody on the Remain side has been explaining all along why we have to meet our financial responsibilities. You could be making a case for saying people on the other side have been lying to their supporters, but I'm not going to argue with that. They've lied to them about everything.
OK, both sides, because we've been paying more, because apparently we've been paying £15 billion a year for the free trade. I mean, obviously, private school dictionary is different to a state school one, because free means you don't pay anything, you get it for nothing, but obviously. No, it doesn't.
Free means it hasn't got tariffs in place. It doesn't mean, because if it's free, it's not trade, it's just gifts.
All right, but 15...
You don't have to go to private school to understand that, Lee.
Well, free to me is like when someone says, that's a nice watch, Lee, how much you pay for that? And I thought, you know what, I didn't pay a penny, got it for free.
Yeah, anyway, free trade would have involved you buying it without any tariffs being put in place on import and export of that watch. But we're going down another rabbit hole, Lee. I'm not...
Right. Let me hear me out, because it's took a year to get through.
I've hardly spoken.
So it's free, you don't pay any tariffs. But to get that deal, you've got to pay £15 billion a year, OK? But we get 5 back, we've been paying £10 billion a year. Now we learn that we're also signed up to other stuff. We've got to pay this 40 billion because no, you agreed to pay for this.
Mate, I've got a switchboard groaning under the weight of people talking. Just tell me the smartest point you were going to make when you rang in.
Right, because you keep going on about tariffs. Do you understand tariffs?
No, this is not a question. When I said make the smartest point you've got, the opposite of that is asking me a question. Just tell me something sort of, I don't know, clever.
That we're actually out. We don't get told what to do anymore. You keep saying...
How are the customs union and single market regulations going to be imposed without somebody telling us what to do?
Well, we'll have to impose them as well for stuff that comes into...
Well, that's what we do now.
Yeah. So what's I don't see what the problem is.
I know you don't, Lee. And I really, really envy you. It's 11:15. OK, here's today's parody or real person. Keith has tweeted to say, LBC, why are you still employing this joker? Is it just to appease the liberal elite? Given that his name's Keith, and that speaks of a certain generational likelihood, I'm going to go with real rather than parody. But frankly, we're living in a world now where it's almost impossible to tell the difference. How can anybody be cross with me today? I'm pointing out that finally reality has bitten. Theresa May has recognised, as she's known all along, that the major challenge that she has as the leader of the Conservative Party is to somehow muzzle the rabid dogs of Brexit. She's done that because reality at some point becomes irresistible. The only people who are going to carry on or be able to carry on in denial are the people who are nowhere near power. Even Gove and Johnson appear to have come into line today, although in the case of the second of those characters, I wouldn't bank on anything being permanent. In terms of what we'll be paying, 35 to 39 billion pounds, considerably more, of course, given the state of the pound currently against the euro compared to what it was like before the referendum vote. But the pound will gather a little bit as a result of yesterday's deal, the moving away from that possibility, which EU negotiators, EU leaders were beginning to fear. I think one of them said 50-50 recently, that they began to believe that no deal was possible. You remember we were told, if we make them think no deal is possible, then they'll give us loads of concessions. When asked today what concessions the European Union had given, Michel Barnier said, at this stage, we're not going to make them pay the removal costs of the European Union agencies that are leaving the United Kingdom to go elsewhere. That would be the EMA, what's the other one? The European Medicines Agency, and the banking one, the one where they do the banking, the European Banking Authority, I think. Hundreds of jobs, lots and lots of money spent here by those organisations. That's going elsewhere. And Barnier, when asked what concessions he'd made, said at this stage we're not going to make them pay for that. So they're not going to have to pay Pickfords to move all of these jobs from our economy to others. That's it. And that stupid question. Of course you're cross with me. I've held up a mirror again. People like Keith can't bear what they see in it. Paul's in Dublin. Paul, what's going on?
Just listened to your conversation this morning. Very interesting.
Good man.
No,
you have to say something else. I'm a slightly out of. I'm slightly different from the normal phone-in host, but we can't just leave it at that, my friend.
No. The one thing that always amazes me is the financial illiteracy of so many of your contributors. They seem to keep going on about this 40 billion. As if it's in any way material. I mean, let's get facts here. The UK is the 5th largest economy in the world.
6th.
It's a $2.2 trillion economy. It's massive, right?
Yes.
40 billion is buttons. Whether it's absolute pennies to be paid over the next 10, 20, 30 years. It's totally irrelevant to the conversation, whether you're a Brexiter or a Remainer. 40 billion.
Well, you're right and wrong, if you'll allow me to say that. Also, I'm going to defend. I think the majority of my callers are a little. Perhaps, I mean, the one immediately preceding you, old Lee, he perhaps falls into the category that you describe, but I'm going to resist the conclusion that everybody does. The problem is that you're doing facts, whereas what everybody recognised from the moment that bus appeared with 350 million written on the side, because if 40 billion is a pittance, Paul, then 350 million is a fraction of a pittance, and that is widely considered to have been the figure that pushed the Brexit vote over the line. That £350 million NHS conflation just caught people in a way that nothing on the Remain side could do. So while you're right, and I think if you worked out what each household pays towards European membership every day, you'd probably get change out of a couple of quid, wouldn't you? But that doesn't matter, because once you've created the European Union as this mad, they've called it the EU-SSR, Paul. People describe it as the Fourth Reich. Once you've created this mad perception of it, then the notion of giving them 12 pence becomes abhorrent to your hardcore Brexit extremists. So you're right and wrong.
Yeah, well, no. The point is, leaving the European Union, the United Kingdom, there is a logic to it in relation to sovereignty. There's no question that the UK will become much more sovereign when they're.
What does that mean?
They never become total. Well, they will have more control over certain other laws, but it
not if in the absence of an agreement on the Northern Irish border, we will continue to abide by customs union and single market rules. So why are we going to be sovereign? Because they'll be overseen by the European Court of Justice.
No, they will not. Well, obviously, they won't be sovereign because the United Kingdom is not going to leave the UN or NATO or any other organisation.
You're not surely suggesting that joining any supranational institution on the planet with the interests of collective goals and benefits involves a voluntary surrender of some sovereignty, are you, Paul? Because that's far too close to a statement of fact for a normal Brexit-related conversation.
I mean, there was a chap on earlier that you had, I don't know if it was this show, and he was talking about joining the European Army, But
that's another very successful phantom, isn't it?
NATO is the European Army. Like United Kingdom. If somebody was to invade France tomorrow,
the United Kingdom would have to come to France's aid.
Yes.
They have signed up for that as far as NATO is concerned.
And NATO's threatened by Donald Trump at the moment, both in words and arguably in deeds. He seems oddly keen to weaken it.
I mean, before the referendum in the UK, John Redwood was on the Irish radio channel, and in fairness to him, he spoke a lot of sense. The Irish radio host asked him, basically, you just want to leave to get out. And he said, yeah. And if it's going to cost you a fortune, he said, yeah, it will cost us money. He was honest enough. And I thought, fair play to him. He just wants to leave the European Union, and he was prepared to accept that it will be financially a problem for the UK, certainly in the short to medium term. Long term, who knows? But that's the point. The only logic of leaving Brexit is to increase UK sovereignty, but you will never become totally sovereign.
No, it's all about the fields, Paul. It's all about the fields. I just slightly reeled there where I heard you say that John Redwood was making perfect sense, but then, of course, you qualified by saying he was making perfect sense when he said something ridiculous, in that it doesn't matter what the finances are, it doesn't matter what the economic impact is, it doesn't matter what the social impact is upon people, as long as it feels like we've left this mythical enemy.
No, in fairness to Redwood, what he was saying was he was prepared to accept the financial hit.
Yes, exactly.
For the UK, for the increase
because of how it's going to feel. Because of how it's going to feel. He can't point at any material benefit, but it feels like we're more sovereign, he hopes. I mean, he's in for a rude awakening, because he's going to feel exactly the same when he wakes up in April of 2019 as he did when he went to bed at the end of March. But as long as it's all about the feels, and that's the thing that perhaps a lot of commentators missed until it was too late.
Yeah.
Is that your first time on phone-in radio? Is that your first time on?
Me?
Yeah.
No, I've been on a few times.
Oh, have you? All right. It's just at the beginning. I thought you were expressing a sort of degree of innocence about how things unfold. I enjoyed talking to you. We'll do it again. Paul, take care. Alexander is in Plymouth. Alexander, what's going on?
I'm just kind of wondering how much of the kind of BS that we are going to have to pull away before we can start campaigning to, just remain and reform.
I think that's become less...
The nuanced argument that we, that some of us tried to put forward all of this time. Because, to be honest, I'm not particularly happy with this deal. I don't know how far we're going to have to get in this process before I just give up and just get my Dutch passport.
Can you do that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a citizen by birth. I've just never had to have a passport because...
But I do it anyway. Do it anyway, don't you think? And people.
If I do get one, I don't get dual nationality. If I get
Dutch is one of the countries. I didn't realise that some countries don't allow dual nationality, do they? And I didn't know that Holland was one of them.
And Mark Rutte said quite plainly that he wouldn't allow it as basically a Brexit cop-out.
Fair enough. I have a problem with your question, and the problem is that I don't have any, objective rectitude. I'm not right about everything by any stretch of the imagination, and quite often with regards to Brexit discussions, I've really wanted to be wrong, and being proved right on an almost daily basis has been one of the most bizarrely unpleasant experiences of my career. But I think...
For sure, it's understandable.
Yeah, I think that notion of this, of putting the brakes on and staying in, has become less likely today.
Yeah, I understand it. I just don't think... I still don't think it's right. I still don't think coming out is going to produce any material benefit whatsoever. Because there doesn't appear to be any evidence to suggest so.
Well, this is what John Redwood was referring to, albeit that we're taking Paul in Dublin's recollection of what John Redwood was talking about on Irish radio. It doesn't matter. It does sound like him. There aren't going to be any material benefits. It's all about how it feels. And that sounds insulting to the people who are actually going to prove me right, because they're not going to be able to provide any material benefits. They're going to talk about feels. And that's what Theresa May understood, I think, implicitly when she started saying Brexit means Brexit. People with fully functioning intellects just wondered what on earth she was talking about, the most fatuous of fatuous slogans. But people who were in it for the feels, they loved it, because, oh yeah, Brexit means Brexit. It doesn't mean anything, doesn't matter, it feels right, it's going to happen, we're going to get out. Where are we going to go? Don't care, we're going to get out. Is it going to be better? Probably not, but we're going to get out, and that's where we are. And I think that what's happened here, and it's not a deal, let's be absolutely clear about that. It's a deal to start having talks about what trade talks might look like. It's not even a deal to start trade talks, but it seems to me that she's kind of done enough to make stopping the whole process less likely.
The only thing is with that is that fields don't, fields don't help my bank account.
No, it doesn't matter, mate. You've already seen the polling that says they'll be happy to take an economic hit. They'll be happy to see a family member lose their job.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm one of those people. Three out of four of my grandparents, were born on the continent. I've grown up very much kind of.
Oh, I'm late for the news. Yes.
Was it in between?
Well, you're what Theresa May would have called a citizen of nowhere, which, again, I suppose was an early indication of just how far down one route she was prepared to go. Alexander, I'm late for the news, which I apologise to everybody. We still find ourselves wallowing in that curious hinterland between fact and feeling, and I suspect that people like me have been a little bit too hard on those who've been led by their feelings. It's a human condition, isn't it? To be led by your feelings. We'd be robots if we weren't led by our feelings. But unfortunately, when the feelings don't stand up to rational scrutiny, and those feelings have led half the country to lead the other half down a ridiculous path, it's hard to retain patience sometimes. Where are you today? What is going on in your world? Which leavers will be happy? Because Remainers are relieved. This is just me, all right? You can challenge any of this. I'm personally relieved that the full horror of the kind of Owen Paterson, Daniel Hannan flavoured no deal sort of scenario appears to have been avoided. I don't know if it's fair to put Hannan on that list, actually. So we'll just leave it with Paterson and Bernard Jenkin and people like that. That was becoming plausible. And if we've learned anything during the Brexit debate, it's that you can no longer, as a British voter, believe that democracy will somehow prevent us from undertaking an act of massive national self-harm. So even the fact that the penny still hasn't dropped for so many people on how silly we're being is all the evidence you need that we might have been poised to do something even sillier. Theresa May, I think, and a lot of the Conservative Party... here's the thing. The Good Friday Agreement and Jeremy Corbyn have saved Britain from bashing itself over the head with a baseball bat and allowed us instead to keep the Brexit lobby happy by merely punching ourselves in the face quite hard. Because Theresa May's fear of Jeremy Corbyn taking over has no doubt in part motivated her softening, and the Good Friday Agreement, which none of the key players seem to understand, but which regular listeners to this programme will have known was going to come screaming into the Brexit debate like an articulated truck. I told you that since last June. I'm surprised it took so long, to be honest with you, but that's because the negotiations have been so moribund. So Jeremy Corbyn, the fear of Jeremy Corbyn right across the Conservative Party, the knowledge post-election that he could actually win, he could end up in Downing Street, which I think everybody prior to the last election thought was a little bit fanciful, coupled with the detail of the Good Friday Agreement, have ensured that Theresa May will only really be seeking to deliver a soft Brexit. I don't know whether that was the plan. The thing is, some people are suggesting that this was the plan all along. There's no way she planned to lose her majority in the general election. What she would have done with that majority is a fascinating question. Would she have actually used it to railroad this sort of soft Brexit through? Or, that's where I don't know, because I've got this begrudging... admiration isn't quite the right word. Sympathy. I've got sympathy for her, a begrudging sympathy for her. I think she is acting dutifully, incompetently, but out of a sense of duty. And what she would have done with an enhanced majority over the last election, we will never know. It depends which side of the party she would have essentially alienated by using her enhanced parliamentary majority. The side that are insisting that we get the baseball bat and start smashing ourselves over the cranium, or the side that were insisting that we either stop this whole silly process altogether or we do it in as light a touch a way as possible. They seem to me to have prevailed. 11:39 is the time. Dave is in Tewkesbury. Dave, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James. First-time caller.
Very welcome.
I'm in on the Remainer, and I'm just so relieved. I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel like we've been on a bus, and everyone's saying, look, the bus is headed towards the cliff. Look, we're all going to die.
Yes.
And the rest of the people are saying, no, we're fine. We voted to go this way.
Yes, it's the will of the people, and you have to stay on the bus, and you have to stop complaining and stop distracting the driver because he's got a cliff to drive over.
Yeah, it's awful.
Yes.
But anyway, it looks like... It's funny, because on the one hand... And also, you're getting people saying, well, actually, we voted to go over the cliff.
Yes.
Like, well, actually, no, we don't necessarily need to go over the cliff. There are other ways of sort of moving.
No, but there are people who are furious that we appear to have averted going over the cliff. They would be the kind of hard Brexit, I don't know what they call themselves, the people who'll be bleating about betrayal and humiliation and whatever it may be. They're desperate to carry on going over the cliff because as long as we haven't actually reached the cliff edge, they could continue to con the public that we were doing something wise. They just want to kind of filibuster our entire existence until some unspecified point in the future.
Yeah, but there's also this myth, and I even heard it on this radio station, where, the only Brexit is a hard Brexit. We voted to leave the single market. We voted to leave the customs union. Well, no, we didn't. Yes, that was the rhetoric of the referendum.
There's the rhetoric of the Remain campaign. David Cameron and George Osborne are the ones that said if you vote to leave the European Union, you'll have to leave the single market. And they were called liars, and that was chalked up as Project Fear. People like Patterson and Hannan and others categorically stated that we wouldn't have to leave the single market. Anybody who cited the Norway option was categorically stating that we wouldn't have to leave the single market, and they've been proven to be liars because we are leaving the single market but obeying all of its rules, which is about as close to that's why you're relieved. It's a fudge, but it's a hell of a lot better than the alternative.
Yeah. But worse than that, if we leave in the way we're going to leave, and yes, it's a relief because we're not going to commit economic Armageddon, but if we leave and sort of stay in the single market or obey its rules, or however we do that, we don't have any say in it. At least now, within the European Union, we can actually influence that.
We're not going to have any say over the rules and regulations that we have to live by, but we're going to have more sovereignty, Dave. Pay attention.
No, but what is sovereignty? I mean, surely sovereignty is some control over your own destiny. If you're part of a big group of countries, and you can actually have influence.
No. Sovereignty is just a word that you use like a cosh to hit clever people over the head with. You don't have to explain what it is. You just shout it really loud. And if that doesn't work, shout fish.
I want my country back.
That one's under review at the moment because it's going to seem to involve surrendering a large portion of it, Northern Ireland by name, to an almost inexorable drive towards the unification of Ireland. So I don't know that we can say getting our country back. It depends what you mean by country.
Absolutely, but the other point I'd like to make,
yes,
is we have I'm showing my age. Back in the 1980s, we had some brilliant politicians. We had some like giants. But if you look at some of the Muppets running this country, especially some of the Muppets running the Leave campaign, there's like nobody. If we'd have had a good leader, if we didn't have Boris Johnson, if it had been somebody who was actually a visionary, a really good leader, who could have taken on and been Prime Minister, and they'd have reached out and said, well, look, lads, yes, we've won. It's a 52-48%. You can tell me, Ultraman.
I love it. It's lads.
Look, lads, it's a 52%, 48% win. Well, let's reach out. We're not you winner. Let's be magnanimous in victory. We won, but let's unite the country by, say, staying in the single market. I think the country would have been united. I don't think we'd be having this.
I think we gave too much attention to the racist liars. Seriously, I know I was working at the BBC during some of the campaign, and you'd sit in the production meeting and say, do we have to put a racist liar on? They go, yeah, we've got to balance out everyone who comes on being informed and knowledgeable and intelligent. We've got to balance them out with someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, which meant that the media depiction of it, even somewhere like the BBC, got completely skewed, and the newspapers weighed in and just tore up reality in a way that we're going to be ruining for generations. So I think you're being a bit, if you'll allow me, a bit idealistic there, Dave.
Yeah, maybe I am, but I know, in my opinion, at least it's better. It's better than what we might have had.
Yeah, it is considerably better than what it looked like we might get as well. But of course, you have the other issue there of I'm just looking for Gary's tweet, Gary Barker, because he came in while we were talking about feeling relieved. He came in with the I don't feel relieved, and this is a valid point as well. Let me make sure I get it right. Sorry, I was trying to get more tweets into the programme and messing it up. It is also true that the European Union has just announced a trade deal. I don't know if it's free or not. I'll have to check with Lee in Croydon. They've just announced a trade deal with Japan. That looks a little bit trolly. They could have waited until after Christmas, couldn't they? To do that, I mean, literally on the same day that they say, oh, by the way, you're doing everything we told you to do. Oh, and we've just announced a trade deal with Japan.
Yeah, so look at what you could have won.
Look at what you could have won. It's the Jim Bowen of international diplomacy. Have a look at what you could have won. It's 11:45. We will continue our contemplation of this curious latest chapter in Brexit, in which people who don't want to leave the European Union are quite relieved. People who do want to leave the European Union but aren't mad are quite confused. And people who do want to leave the European Union and are mad are furious. Yeah, I've just nailed it. Is that it? Can we go home? That's it, isn't it? So Remainers are relieved but still sad because it's also unnecessary. Rational leavers are confused because they're realising just how many pups they've been sold. And mad leavers are furious because they're mad. 0345 6060 973. I want to cover something else. It's important. I've got a bit of a sort of existential crisis going on professionally at the moment because this is obviously a commercial news organisation, and the stories that I personally consider to be of the most importance are not necessarily the stories that will put the most bums on seats or garner the most attention. And we have to try and negotiate that tension between, I suppose, the speak your won't machine and the ghost train. Grenfell Tower brought it into very, very sharp relief, the kind of stuff that, frankly, should have been covered from pillar to post. It was being blogged about by residents and completely ignored by media. And I think I would file the tram crash in Croydon under the same sort of heading, which is why Rachel Venables is here to talk us through some very, very troubling new developments.
Yes, well, yesterday, James, we finally, after more than a year after that tragic tram crash in Croydon last November, in which 7 people lost their lives, yesterday we finally got the last report by the Rail Accident Investigation Branch. It's pretty solid. I've got 174, I think, pages here in front of me in a very glossy document bound together, a year's worth of work full of details, diagrams, photographs, essentially trying to sum up and trying to come up with a reason why. Why did that tram crash going at more than 3 times the speed limit on a sharp bend in the pouring rain one early morning last November? And really, what it sort of summarises is an almost perfect storm of problems. So the big headline, really, the big thing that most grabs people's attention, of course, focuses on the driver. The driver, they believe, had a temporary loss of awareness, possibly caused by a microsleep. So he wasn't aware of where he was going far too quickly, the tram overturned and disaster struck. But there were all sorts of other warnings and red lights that have been missed. Things like not enough or not enough adequate signage on that route. So there was no real clear way to warn the driver, you have to turn left very, very quickly. There was also what's been described as a culture of fear. So there were previous incidents or near misses, 9 in fact, on that exact same bend, where drivers suddenly had to hit the brakes in a bit of a panic, but they never told their bosses that there was a problem on that route because about the repercussions. They were worried about getting told off, getting into trouble. There was also a very close near miss less than 2 weeks before this fatal accident, where again the exact same line, the exact same bend, the tram nearly toppled over. A woman who was on the tram was so scared she got off it at the next stop. She reported it to bosses, and bosses really didn't do anything. It's sort of been described as an almost glacial response to the investigation, because it seems that the people who were responsible for the safety almost didn't comprehend that a tram crash of this nature was possible, that a tram could derail and
that's
could
an interesting
cause
way of
so
putting
many
it.
lives. Could lose so many lives.
That does have a parallel with Grenfell. It was a tragedy so huge that people didn't think it was plausible.
I think, and there's a personal element here where I was sent as a reporter to cover both instances very early in the morning, and for both of them, getting the phone call or seeing on social media, firstly, there's been a tram derailment. Secondly, a few months later, sadly, there's a fire in a tower block. Both times, I didn't think the problem would be too bad, and I think many people thought, okay, a tram's derailed. Well, that can't be too bad, can it? I mean, trams are quite safe. They go quite slowly. You get there and you see just the chaos. I mean, so many streets cordoned off. You had this huge hundreds of police vehicles, ambulances, fire crews. I mean, people were physically trapped underneath this tram. And in similar ways, Grenfell as well, you know, you've spoken to firefighters, people who lived in the area. They never thought a fire could get that bad in a tower block. You know, we just assume it's going to be safe.
How confident can my listeners in Croydon, especially Lee, how confident can they be that things are better, things have improved?
Well, there's been a series of recommendations, some of which have been acted on. one of the recommendations are things like automatic safety braking, things like a sort of scanner system which would monitor the driver's faces. So if they have this sort of micro-sleep, if they start to get a bit tired, it would maybe buzz their chair, make a noise. That has actually been introduced in Croydon, so people can be slightly reassured on that. There are other issues, though, that really haven't been addressed, and one of them, which is quite worrying, I think, which is the windows and the doors. So I believe it was around half the people who were on this tram, 70 people in total, actually sort of got flung out of the tram itself. Every one of the 7 people who lost their lives had been flung from the rolling tram because once people hit the windows shattered. They didn't keep people contained in that small space. And the windows, according to the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, were regulation. So they were fine. They were as safety bosses assumed would work. But they didn't. And there's a question there, and one of the recommendations is that all trams, up and down the country, should be fitted with much more secure windows that won't smash on impact, that won't see people flying out and eventually trapped under these, horrifically heavy vehicles.
Rachel Venables, what will be the next chapter in this saga then?
Well, I think the next chapter is there is an ongoing police investigation. TfL have also launched their own inquiry, so there are several other elements to it, but the Rail Accident Investigation Branch, this is the big one that many have been expecting because they are independent. Really, the question now is both for the survivors, they've now got answers. I spoke to one woman who was injured in the crash, and she said it really reevaluated how she felt about it. She's been angry at the driver for a year, and now she's starting to think, well, he was just one man, and there were all of these other problems behind him.
Did you mention shift patterns when you were speculating about his fatigue?
So shift patterns were looked at and actually found not really to be a problem.
Okay.
They believe he hadn't been overworked, although he was tired. There's a bit of detail in the document about when he'd gone to sleep. It looks as though he'd gone to sleep at around 10, 11 o'clock and woken up at 3:30. So, but this idea of a micro-sleep, there'll be many people listening.
Thinking, what the hell's that?
So if you've ever been on a really long journey,
out, isn't it?
And your eyes are focused, and you just zone off, and you go a bit tired, and suddenly your head jolts.
Such a shame that we're not filming this, because your little performance there was quite magical.
But I'm sure you appreciate it's that monotonous, it's that exhaustion.
It's what nodding off means, isn't it? You nod and then you wake yourself up again, and we've all been there, although thankfully not while driving trams. Rachel Venables, many thanks indeed. The time is 11:56. The question is, look at what you could have won. Could you imagine a couple of years ago if we were? This is. Here you go. Right, write this down. Take some notes. This is where Brexit has messed up everything, because even if this was 2 years ago, we wouldn't have known what a big deal it was. So what has just been announced in Brussels, not the piddling stuff about the backwater that we're going to become, but the deal that essentially creates the largest open economic zone in the world, announced this morning, agreed in principle in July. The European Union and Japan have finalised a free trade deal which will encompass approximately 30% of the world's GDP. The whole world, almost a third of the whole world in a free trade area, just as we leave. Now, this is actually a defence of leavers, not a Yabu sucks to them, because as someone who's become a Remainer since we voted to leave, that would not have got the coverage. Our media has let us down on an industrial scale, because we'd have sat here and we'd have probably started talking about fishing quotas or blue passports instead of actually recognising what an epic instrument the European Union is and how valuable membership should be. I don't know whether it was my job to start telling you that stuff. I always like swimming against the tide of unthinking right-wing tabloids, but I never got particularly worked up about the European Union because I never really understood stuff. But there you go. That has been announced today. Jean-Claude Juncker and the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Considerable economic value, but speak also of strategic importance, demonstrating both regions' commitment to keeping the world economy working on the basis of free, open and fair markets with clear and transparent rules. Oh, down with free, open and fair markets with clear and transparent rules. It was never supposed to be just a trade agreement, James. Well, it was. Ted Heath said so, but there you go. If you're saying that, you're denying the importance of strategic importance as well. It's coming up to 11:59. It's the Jim Bowen of international diplomacy. I think that's going to be my favourite phrase of the day after that splendid caller suggested that the Japanese trade deal is effectively the European Union playing the role of Jim Bowen, the much-missed presenter of Bullseye. At the end of Bullseye, if you're not familiar with this game show, it's an absolute classic. probably the best ever in my opinion, but it did have a curious prize process by which quite often somebody who lived on the 14th floor of a tower block in Sheffield would win, for example, a speedboat. And you'd wonder, presumably there was a cash alternative. But they also, if you failed to win the star prize through a combination of cunning, guile and skill with darts, he'd show you what it was. And there's footage of grown men almost breaking down in tears at the sight of the caravan that could have been theirs. Yeah, let's see what you could have won, Jim Bowen would say in his inimitable Lancastrian tones. And what the European Union have done with this is effectively say to Great Britain, say to the United Kingdom, have a look at what you could have won. We're about to become the largest open economic zone on the planet. But don't worry, leavers, because we're going to be able to do deals with Panama. Back to Brexit. Have a look at some of the tweets that are coming in. A curious mixture of contrite, confused, and downright confounded. Yeah, you're right, I think, on that Japanese deal. Talks on trade. We've agreed to start talking about what talks on trade might look like. But Ollie responds to the double whammy of EU-related news today by saying, brilliant. We have to keep to those rules and regulations and laws that people hated but couldn't name, all while not profiting from the new trade deal with Japan. It's almost beyond parody. I think we're going to be okay. Diluted and watered down and diminished, but not disastrous. For example, what happens now to the Japanese car companies in Britain? There's no way. Good God. You remember when German car companies were going to come to the rescue of Leave? And didn't, as any fool could have probably predicted. The Japanese car companies are going to rescue us from some of the hardest edges of Brexit, aren't they? Now that we've signed this trade deal, there's no way that Toyota or Nissan or companies like that are going to put up with having to obey different regulatory regimes in their British factories than they do in their European one. So all we lose is the hit we take on the pound and the right to influence what those regulations are. It's a supply chain. You've got about a 30-minute... There's a word for it. It's a no delay. There's a funny word for it, actually, where these factories close almost immediately if the supply chain slows. They don't have warehouses full of spare parts. They're literally using stuff almost as soon as it comes off the lorry. So I've had so many educations in so many areas since this vote happened. I just wish I'd known all this stuff before. And I can't imagine any circumstances whatsoever in which Japanese car companies, now that they have a free trade deal with the European Union, are going to tolerate any dilution or diminishment of regulatory oversight in their facilities here compared to a facility in Germany or France. So, odd though it seems, the German car companies didn't come to the rescue of hard Brexiters, as they kept saying they would, but it looks like they are going to come to the rescue of soft Brexiters, which I have a feeling, and I know how cross this is making some of you. Maybe I'll be different on Monday, but right now I think I'm so relieved that we've avoided the full idiocy of a hard Brexit, of a no deal, that I can see Remainers just sort of slowly and somewhat reluctantly, but with that comfort of relief, transmogrifying into soft Brexiters. It's the least bad option once you accept the inevitability of leaving. But a lot of you are yet to accept the inevitability of leaving, and you're feeling a little bit betrayed by me. And you have so few champions and spokespeople that I won't yet fully go down that road. Steve is in Islington. Steve, what would you like to say?
Wow, you've worn me out.
You've worn me out, mate. I've got to get through to 1 o'clock. You can have a lie down after this.
Oh, finally. Right, I don't know where I've got to start, but I'll be perfectly honest with you, James. I am confused, totally and utterly confused. And the reason I'll tell you this is I'm not an educated man.
Oh.
Far from it.
Yeah.
But when people come on the phone to you and speak to you every day about leaving Europe and leaving the European Union, everybody else, including people like me, seems like a complete and utter idiot. They talk to you, and you're an educated man, they talk to you as if everybody that's voted no and voted leave don't know what they're on about. But the point I'm trying to make is, James, is why were we ever given the vote?
Yeah.
The fact that we was given a vote, right, and most people that voted to leave Europe voted for probably, and this is my own opinion, on maybe 2 or 3 things. One was immigration, right, which is, you might not think it, James, but a lot of people do. Obviously, most of the 52% of people that voted probably thought like me that we are flooded with migrants, flooded to almost at the point that the country can't take any more. We're also worried about our schooling. We're also worried about our housing. We're also worried about the National Health Service. But we're all deemed as being complete and utter idiots. The fact that we were given this vote was so wrong for all the reasons that you have been speaking about in the last year. You know, you look at the customs union, the soft and hard.
I think the biggest thing for me when I tried.
Know anything about it?
No, when I try and reach out to people like you, the biggest thing is that we had the rights and we had the rules in place to have much more stringent immigration regulations than the ones that we have, and subsequent governments elected not to impose them for two reasons, they would argue, I imagine. Number one, it wouldn't be cost effective. It would cost so much to do and it wouldn't save anything. And number two, because having immigration as this constant Banquo's ghost at the feast, that they could constantly say all the things you've just listed, you're blaming on immigration. I blame them on bad government. But if I was running a bad government, I'd love the idea that people like you were blaming it all on immigration.
It is a bad government, but James, the point I'm trying to make is all the other issues, the parts that you're talking about, of the effect that it's going to have on this country financially.
Yep.
95% of the 52% probably didn't know anything about this. You know, when I listen to you every day and I try to absorb what you're saying about, you know, hard and soft Brexit, hard and soft borders,
yes,
and customs unions and everything else that goes with it, it's way above our head, James.
It's not, mate.
Catching up, it is, James.
It's not. Why are you listening every day then, unless you understand what I'm saying?
I know, because James, I'm 56 years of age, but I'm still trying to learn. That is what I'm trying to
You have learned. The thing you can't compute.
I'm learning from you. But
yes. Thank you, mate.
Say, James, is
go on.
When I go, look, I live in Harrow.
Yeah.
When I go down to Harrow, and this is not being racist, James, because that term is so easily used and very loosely used. When I go down to Harrow, and I've lived here for 30 years, I walk into Harrow Shopper Centre, and I swear to God, I don't know where I am. I've got Polish, Romanians, Bulgarians sitting outside coffee houses doing sod all day. I've got every nationality under the sun, and it's lost its identity. When I go into Norfolk Park Hospital, and I went in there 3 Sundays ago because I had to go in an emergency, I walked into the accident emergency, as I said to your researcher, 120 people in there. I was lucky if I saw 3 or 4 white faces. It's okay if you live.
Now that is racist.
No,
that last bit is.
It's realistic.
No, it isn't, because you're forming an opinion of people or their value based on their colour. There are people who don't have white faces who are just as British as you and me, Steve.
Perhaps there are, James, but if...
Well, no, they all are.
You go down
and that's... name me the European Union... Steve, mate, let's not do this. Let's do it nicely. Just tell me the European Union country that is populated by non-white people.
Couldn't tell you.
Well, have a go. Have a little think.
Say the question again?
The European Union countries, because we're talking about your reasons for leaving the European Union, and then you mentioned the fact that there weren't any white people in Norfolk Park Hospital. So which European Union countries are essentially non-white?
Probably none.
So why are you talking about those people then?
All right. Well, let's backtrack.
Yeah, let's, mate. I'm happy to let you do that.
No, let's backtrack. But it is still a valid point, James.
Not in the context of a conversation about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah,
and I'm afraid that if you are judging people according to their skin colour, then you are, and I say this with love and reluctance, then you are indulging in racial prejudice.
But James is.
So I don't care what colour you are. Yeah, I don't say. I'm never going to say to Beth at the end of the programme, we had too many black people on today, or we had too many white people on today.
But it's not all about. It's not all about white people, white English people. We're going off tangent.
Well, no, you did, mate. I'm just reining you back in again. So crack on.
It's not all about the racist issue. It's just about the fact that the country has lost its identity.
What does that mean?
And that. Well, what does it mean? It means that what I've just said, that...
You've just said that you don't like seeing brown faces at the hospital.
Okay, no. Is it right then, James? Let's give another example. Right? I might be digging myself a big hole, but...
I'll pull you out, mate, I promise.
Right, but the point I'm trying to make, if you went down to my local, and I'll give you an absolute point here, if you went down to my local supermarket, I won't name which one it is, okay?
Yeah.
And one of my sons tried to get a job down, or 2 of my sons tried to get a job down there in a few years when they were in between university and going from college to university. At one point, James, there was 23 tills open, and 22 of them, okay, had Indians or Pakistani people.
But we're talking about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, James, is this is where it's all coming from. And when I mentioned this to the manager, okay, the manager said to me, we have to reflect the local community. And the point I'm trying to make, James, and you're trying to, to a degree, defend me, but to attack me, is that right, James?
Mate,
that is why people have voted out of Europe.
Because we've got too many brown people on the tills in Harrow.
It's not about having too many, but when I was
what is it then, Steve? Just mate, slow down a little bit. Because if you're not complaining about there being too many brown people, why do you keep talking about the number of brown people in the hospital and the number of brown people in the supermarket?
The reason I'm saying that is, James, is because that is why people voted to leave Europe, because of Great Britain.
I don't disagree with you. No, it's not because of Great Britain losing its identity. It's because people are frightened of brown people.
No, it's not about it. No, James.
What difference does it make to me? Just help me out here, because I can kind of get my... just because I work on the phones every day, so I have no idea what colour anybody is. Steve, stop talking. Stop talking, just for a moment, my friend, all right? Why does it matter to you what colour the person that you buy your milk off is?
Well, it doesn't matter the colour that the person I buy my milk off, James. But the point I'm trying to make is why people voted out of Europe.
I'm not arguing with you. They voted out of Europe because they think there's too many brown people in their hometowns.
Is it unfair then, James, to say that when I mentioned what I said about the local supermarket,
and the hospital,
when I'm told, and the hospital, but let's go to the supermarket. When I'm told that we have to reflect the local community, is that not racist, James?
No, Steve.
Well, explain to me why it's not racist.
What, reflecting the local community?
Yeah, because it's basically saying, well, because there's predominantly more Asian, and because this is what the manager's told me, Steve.
James, you're Steve.
Because there's more, because there's more Indian or ethnic minorities in Harrow, we have to reflect the local community.
Right, well, possibly you misunderstood him, but if anybody in that supermarket was given a job based upon their skin colour, then the employer would be breaking the law.
Well, they did. Because
well, then you should report it to the relevant authorities. But did you? Crikey.
Very shortly.
Well, then let's return to my question, okay?
My son got a job.
I want you to talk to me about this. When I drop my little girls off at school, and in their primary school, there are Polish children and Romanian children, Albanian children, brown children, black children, children of Asian origin, children of Eastern European origin. When I explain, I don't need to, thankfully, but when you're talking to your children when they were younger, how did you explain to them that they should judge their friendship group according to those origins, and they should judge those people in their class differently according to what colour they were or where they came from?
I never ever said to my children when they were kids how they should judge people.
So why do you want to do it with checkout assistants and patients at the hospital?
Because as far as I'm concerned, James, we have to a degree, fight back.
Against what, Steve? Fight against what, Steve? People? Checkout assistants and poorly people?
No, you're twisting your words there, James.
No, I'm not. I'm twisting your words.
No, it's not about that, James.
Go on then. So what are we fighting back against?
What I just said to you earlier.
What? Brown people?
No, it's not about...
What is it then, Steve?
But James, is it fair that if you go into a local supermarket, as an example,
Steve,
and there's 23 tills open and 22... I'll pose one question before I go then, James. I will assure you of one thing.
Go on, mate.
If I went to my local supermarket and there was 22 white English, white Irish, white Scot behind them tills, I can assure you that the other nationalities would have something to say about it.
I can assure you they wouldn't, Steve. I'll leave you with one thought. Let's look at both of your supermarkets, the fictional one and the actual one. The one with 22 brown people on the checkouts and one white person, and then the one with 22 white people and one brown person. Do you know what I see in those supermarkets?
Yeah.
23 people.
but you might, James. But that's unfortunately getting back to the first point of this discussion,
which was don't call me racist.
No, it's why people voted.
I'm not arguing with you. I think you're absolutely right. People voted to leave the European Union because there's too many brown people in their A&E. And I can't help you, Steve. I really can't. Do you think it's going to be better now? Do you think there's going to be fewer Pakistanis in Harrow Sainsbury's as a result of us pulling out of the European Union?
No, I don't.
Oh, well done then, that was great. 12-19. I don't know whether it's relevant or not, but by way of a postscript, Harrow voted to remain by about 64,000 to 53, I think. 24 minutes after 12 is the time. What's going on? For the record, I got no beef with Steve, who clearly cares a lot more about skin colour than I do and feels in some way besieged. But imagine if you were the doctor that he finally got to see at Northwick Park Hospital and you were brown and you'd heard that. And that's what it's like now for people of colour in this country. That's what Brexit has done. They never know when we sit down in front of them, as white people. We never know whether we're one of them or one of us. Wayne, my mate in Basildon, who I mention often on the programme, I don't always mention that he's mixed race because that would just be weird, but growing up in Essex, I know so many people like that, James. They'll say stuff like that even around me because I'm one of the all-right ones. And Steve's right. A lot of people did. That was the whole point about unleashing the racist rhetoric. It never would have got Brexit passed unless people like Steve somehow felt that leaving the European Union was a way of objecting to the number of brown sales assistants in his local Sainsbury's. And I'm not misrepresenting him or twisting his words. That's what he said. Too many brown people. And there's not, of course, a single country in the European Union that has a non-white population, a majority non-white population. Breaks my heart, that stuff. Didn't used to. It's another thing that's changed. I just confide in you slightly because you're kind enough to listen every day. I don't start high-fiving myself around the studio when we take a call like that anymore. I don't get cross or celebratory or anything. There's no pleasure in hearing that sort of pain at all because the man's problems are utterly insoluble unless he can go back in time 150 years, and even then the same people would be pouring the same poison into the same ears with a slightly different target. It'd be me as an Irish person that he hated. So all these Irish people, all these Irish, he probably is Irish, doesn't realise he's doing it. And I don't know how you do that. That's why I can never forgive the people. I find the talk that these loonies use of treason and treachery, the ones that the racist lies, the kind of people who have poisoned Steve's soul, they use language like that. I don't like using language like that, but it's going to be very hard, whatever happens with Brexit, it's going to be very hard to forgive the people who've revivified these ancient hatreds, made them acceptable in the public sphere again, when what we laughably called political correctness had succeeded in just screwing the lid down so that you couldn't walk into a waiting room at your local hospital and announce loudly, I'm sure Steve wouldn't do this, but plenty of people do, announce loudly how uncomfortable and unhappy you were with the number of brown faces, and then probably be too thick to notice that two of the nurses and one of the doctors that saw you was similarly complexioned. And we've made it mainstream again. We've allowed it back into the bloodstream of our nation at a time when we've also, as a result partly, voted to make ourselves less economically vibrant. And when countries are less economically vibrant, who normally arrives at the front of the firing line? Yep. Minorities. Just possibly putting a pause on the relief that some of us felt this morning when we realised that the absolute disaster of a so-called no deal or hard Brexit had been averted. 27 after 12 is the time. Sam is in Stoke-on-Trent. Sam, what would you like to say?
I've got a few points, mate.
Okay, you've got 2 minutes because it's 12:29 for the news, so I'll shut up. You crack on.
Yeah. First point, basically, benefits of breakfast, getting away from the common external tariff. I ordered a product from America. The common external, basically, is a tariff on goods coming into the European Union. I ordered the product from America and I had to go down to the sorting office and pay a price. So that means it'll be cheaper food, clothing and footwear.
No, because we're staying in the customs union, so we have to abide by all European Union Reggie.
Eventually we will. And I just think and the second point is, talk about, what that guy was trying to say before was we never voted for mass immigration from wherever it was from. And the other point, basically, is that you keep misrepresenting the people that voted Brexit as stupid, as muppets. Honestly, I've never heard.
No. There's plenty of stupid people on both sides.
Yeah. I mean,
neither side has a monopoly on it.
Yeah, but the lies that came from the Remain campaign, aren't we supposed to be, £400 worse off? We won't be able to pay people's pensions. And the people...
No, you misunderstand the difference between a prediction that hasn't come true and an outright lie. So if I said the sun is going to come up tomorrow and then it didn't, it doesn't make me a liar. It makes me wrong. But if I said we can't control our borders when the rubric is there in black and white that we can, that makes me a liar. There's a massive difference, Sam.
Can I reply? But are we supposed to be in an immediate recession? There's all the business.
No, Mark Carney said it was a possibility.
No, he said an immediate recession. It
was possible. Sam, why are you arguing with me? These aren't opinions. Mark Carney said there was a possibility of a recession as a result of the referendum vote.
We wouldn't be able to pay pensions. It's rubbish. And I'm calling you from Brexit Central. We aren't stupid. The European Union is like a proto-USR because they're just like the Politburo, the Commission, are unelected, basically unaccountable, and it's disgusting. Okay. And the thing is going to end anyway because it's undemocratic. Poland, the Czech Republic, Hungary aren't going to take the jackboot to the European Union, and it's going to finish, mate. So I can't wait to listen to you cry some more. And we're never going to go away. We're never going to stop until we get basically our sovereignty back. And sovereignty means that we can hire and fire the people that make the laws in our name. That's what it means.
Does it?
Yeah. And you are the most bourgeois I've ever heard in Protariat.
Any thoughts on the Japan trade deal?
Good luck, but we'll sign his own. You know, we're not going away. Eventually, when we get out, we'll make our own deals. Yeah. And the EU always uses the Trojan horse of economics. We were told when we joined it was just about trade.
We weren't. Ted Heath wrote a letter to the whole country explaining that it was a political union. Winston Churchill in 1949. You've been very rude to me. I'm not going to be rude to you, however much you try to provoke me. That's absolutely fine. Winston Churchill talked in 1945 about a United States of Europe. A common defence policy is pretty much a description of what our NATO...
The people in the referendum were told it was just about trade.
They weren't, though, Sam. Nobody ever said that.
They were.
Okay, you can say that, but I've got the letter that Ted Heath wrote to the entire country in 1975 saying the polar opposite of what you describe. And he was Prime Minister.
Just to be about trade, and
it doesn't become true by repetition. I just said to you, the Prime Minister at the time wrote a letter to the entire country stressing repeatedly that it was about much more than trade. In fact, I think if you go back to the founding treaties, it talks about closer integration. Mate, you've been sold a pup, and you get angry with the person, but you just keep saying something that's not true, Sam.
So the Commissioner elected to...
Hi, James. I'm a 47-year-old British man with brown skin from Harrow. That man's call made me cry. My pride in being part of one of the most open societies in the world is slowly being eroded and replaced by shame, fear and sadness. I wish I could break bread with that man. He would hopefully understand that there is no difference between me and his sons. That's unsigned, referring to the call before last. The last call, I don't know. Thank you for all the kind words, and I hope he feels better soon. But remember, that's the voice of the people that won. Can we say, you won, get over it yet? Is that allowed? You won, get over. Why is everyone still so cross? This is what you wanted. The only break upon your dreams is reality. That's what Theresa May's had to apply by agreeing to every single thing that the European Union told her to do. And yet we still persist, and all of us persist in thinking of the European Union as somehow not us. All we had to do was change that. If we could have flicked a Gestalt switch, if we could have found some way of talking about union rather than them, us rather than them, everything, all the problems in the world, from the Middle East to Middlesex, could be solved if we could just change us and them into us. And there you go. So the European Union has signed a massive trade deal with Japan, creating the largest free open economic zone on the planet, and we're just as we're leaving out the back door. But it could have been us. Look at what you could have won. Andy's in Hackney. Andy, what would you like to say?
Oh, hello, James. I'm pretty happy today. I'm much happier than yesterday, anyway.
Is this linked to the politics, or have you just had a good run?
No. I mean, I'm enjoying your show, but it's like, I'm happier because it's going to be very close to the single market. It's going to be very close to customs union.
So you're relieved.
I'm relieved,
yes.
and also I'm really, really relieved that I believe it's going to make freedom of movement. They will try and make it look like something's changed, but I really don't believe that too much will.
They don't need to, because fewer people are going to want to come here as a result of that 47-year-old man in Harrow's experiences.
Absolutely, but I do feel for Steve because, at the beginning of his call, he was basically telling you, you've not worked on him, but you've persuaded him on the real issues.
Yeah, right up until the point that skin colour informs his opinion of somebody.
Actually, an issue that doesn't apply because of what you've said. So you've actually persuaded him. It's just that he's, and this is the case for lots of people, that when it comes to those emotive issues, they trump reality.
Always.
So. But on the whole, can I go on the immigration issue? I'd really understand.
If you absolutely must.
People felt it was too high, and I totally understand that. Although in my voice it's like I'm going over it, and I understand that if you're in a position where your government is absolutely rubbish, not just decade after decade, I'm in building houses, generally doesn't put enough into schools or NHS. You can't, if you feel that whatever happens, you're always going to get a bad deal. You then go for the people, for something that you can have an influence over, which is stopping people coming here. Not that I agree with it. I feel it is our government's fault. But the other thing is, I think that we've all been sold. I think we're all believing the tabloids and some of the experts that immigration is automatically always going to be high from the EU. But if you listen to, say, Nigel Farage saying they're coming over here because they're poor, I don't blame them, but they're coming here because it's great here and it's not great there, there was some truth in it. But there's also a truth in that in Poland, people are getting better off. Their economy is growing faster than ours. Same in Romania.
We go back to the obvious model of when British construction workers were being bussed over to Germany on an industrial scale, so much so they made a bloody sitcom about it.
Absolutely. And the truth is that whether we do something or not, when countries are well off, they don't tend to come over for menial jobs. They will tend to come over as an engineer, as a doctor, as a nurse, or they may come over as a nanny. It could be all sorts, but the numbers are coming down, and it's because in a trade, in the EU, you've got countries trading their way to prosperity, basically.
Well, that's what union means, doesn't it? And I suppose that this notion of moving ever closer to integration that terrifies some people so much is the apotheosis of what you described. That would be the point at which, really, migration was more of a social choice than an economic one, because every member state was on some sort of economic equilibrium. I think that's decades off, but if that is the goal, why is that bad?
Yeah, but you see, in a way it's decades off, but in another way it isn't, because if you take, say, the 8 countries that joined at about 15 years ago, we've basically got no net immigration from them anymore. It's dried up, and even so, then if you're basically left with Romania and Bulgaria, Romania's growing at 8.8%. They're catching up pretty fast. I agree with you; it will take a little time, but it's not that far off. I mean,
if you're interested in world peace, I would have thought some form of economic equilibrium over as large a piece of land as possible was the greatest bulwark imaginable against division and destruction. But, what do we know, Andy?
It's about working together.
It's about being us, not us and them.
Yeah, it is.
But I know that sounds like a blooming great motivational poster or something. Andy, mind how you go. A couple of phone lines free, although I'm going to no doubt end the programme with the board as full as it was at the beginning. But if you're quick and you've got something that needs to be said that you think we may have missed, don't be mean about people who ring in and because if they don't ring in, then you've got no chance at all of ever knocking at the door of sanity. You really haven't. It's 12, but I don't like it either. It upsets me to hear people talking like that. And I still cling to the belief that it's not them you should get angry with. The people counting white faces in hospital waiting rooms, the people shouting in Stoke-on-Trent. I don't think it's them you should get angry with. It's the people that have poured it into their ears. And look who pays the people who pour the poison into the ears of men like Sam and Steve. Look who pays them. Billionaires, the owners of the Ritz Hotel, great sponsors of Brexit anti-elitism, the actual owners of the actual Ritz Hotel. You see Donald Trump in his golden lift explaining how he's anti-elite and sticks up for ordinary people. Blame the liars. Don't blame the believers. Blame the people pouring the poison, not the poor sods having it poured into their ears. And as Steve said at the beginning of his call, too busy, really. I hate it when people describe themselves as uneducated. But perhaps lacking the tools that you need, the critical thinking faculties that you are taught at good schools to recognise when somebody is lying to you. Why are they lying to me? Answer, because I'm responsible for problems in their life, and if they'll blame brown people in A&Es and checkout assistants. I had one brilliant tweet from Harrow saying, I live in Harrow, and while I am brown, I'm more interested to know where this mythical shop is with 22 checkouts open. So I love my listeners. But don't. I know how tempting it is. I'm not going to hate on Sam, even though he hated on me. I'm not going to hate on Steve, even though he kind of has a problem with brown people. Because you shouldn't. It's perfectly possible to reach a place in your life where you don't. And if Brexit set us back a few years, unintentionally, on the part of a lot of people who voted to leave, they'll be just as heartbroken and just as dismayed by what we've heard in the last sort of half an hour as you are and as I am. There are plenty of people on the leave side just as disgusted by these sort of attitudes. I believe they bear a little bit of responsibility for bringing them back, but that's a matter of opinion, not a matter of fact. Just concentrate on the people pouring the poison, because they're not going to stop. They're going to carry on pouring it. They're going to carry on lying. They're going to carry on seeking to divide. They're going to carry on with their racist rhetoric, because the alternative is to admit publicly, A, that that's what they've been doing all along, and B, that it was dangerous, divisive, and disastrous to the national interest for them to do so. And you look at the egos of the kind of characters that we're talking about here, and you ask me whether humility, integrity, or honesty are likely to appear on the platform anytime soon. I don't want to use the callers today as representative of a larger sample, but there's certainly a case to be made suggesting that people who want to leave, or wanted and still want to leave, are really cross. A certain type of leaver is really, really cross. And who isn't cross now? This is the point at which I predicted about 6 months ago, where whatever happens, no one's going to be happy with it. So what you have is a feeling of relief that things aren't as bad as they could have been and look like they might be. But of course that's mitigated by people on the other side of the argument who, for whatever reason, really, really wanted that awful thing to happen and are now going to be furious that it isn't. And they will be, with respect, the people who bang on about things like democracy and accountability in the context of the European Union. That's the kind of thing that gets Rafe exercised. He writes, please explain to those who seem not to understand that the European Union operates democracy in a way which is similar to us. The Council of Ministers is like our cabinet, then there are the equivalents of our civil service and Parliament. And also when we talk about European Union commissioners, every country gets one. So the representation is clear and present. Neil's in Toaster. Hello, Neil in Toaster. What would you like to say?
Hi, James. How are you?
Very well, mate. I'm kind of all right. Good. Slightly despairing at the human condition of some of our friends in Stoke-on-Trent and Harrow, but what can you do?
I think you demonstrated rare patience and poise. I'm not sure whether I would have been able to.
What do you mean rare? What do you mean rare? How dare you? What do you mean?
No, not for you, James.
Oh, I see. Okay.
To be honest with you, the calls that you've taken today, particularly those couple, our friend in Stoke in particular, it kind of substantiates, I think, the point that I want to make, which is, for me, just stripping this all down to the essence of what's going on here. It's the psychology of this that informs things more than it is politics.
Yes, for sure.
More than it is economics. And I think the thing that struck me with that call that you took, and some of the other calls that I'd heard on dare I say, a rival radio station this morning, was that the thing that really aggravates and makes furious that certain type of a sort of extreme furious Leave voter is not. I mean, yes, it's treachery, but more than that, more than anything else, it's compromise. It's like their kryptonite. You know, that the kind of getting to a point of compromising and being reasonable and where reality, the rubber hits the road. This is what's making them more furious than anything.
Well, but that's realisation dawning, isn't it? And the fury has to be directed somewhere, and that no one's ever going to direct it at themselves until they have absolutely no choice at all but to do so. So they're going to direct it at Theresa May, they're going to direct it at Remainers, they're probably going to blame Lily Allen before tea time.
Quite possibly. But I think that's the thing. It seems to me. I mean, I'd love to see if there was any correlation between more than intellect, more than politics, more than economics. That the link was about your basic psychology, your basic personality type, and the way that you voted. And I think you can apply that to Remain as well. And probably even to some of the reasonable levers. And I think what we've seen over the last 24 hours is that the difference, actually the greatest difference, is not between Leave and Remain, it's between the reasonable Leavers and Remainers and those extremists on probably both sides.
Yeah, I don't know what an extremist Remainer looks like.
Well, yeah. Well, maybe
Vince Cable. I don't think he's ever been called an extremist. Well, Nick Clegg, the people that say, look, we really should stay in, and then the people like you, if I've read you correctly, you think we should stay in, but you recognise the inevitability of leaving, and now you're relieved that we appear to be moving towards circumstances in which we can leave without hurting ourselves too much, although we're still going to hurt ourselves unnecessarily.
Yeah, and I think that again exposes probably, if I can extrapolate from how I feel and apply that to maybe that other kind of reasonable profile of a Remainer. I've had to manage my expectations downwards.
Yes.
My identity is utterly suffused with being European. I believe passionately in the European Union. I feel passionately in our role in the world. All of those things that I think make us great, but I've had to manage my expectations downwards, which I think is probably attributable to the fact that my personality type, I probably just got a little bit more reasonableness.
Well, and we said we did, yeah, and as that it kicks in, you kind of adjust your expectations according to the circumstances, which we actually touched on yesterday when it was suggested that the best way to get a minimal damage Brexit deal would be to put Remainers in charge. But of course, Theresa May is in charge, and what Theresa May has delivered is, in my opinion, a masterpiece of damage limitation. But I don't know what she's managed, because when Michel Barnier was asked earlier this morning what concessions the European Union had agreed to, he said, at this stage, we're not going to make the UK pay for the removal costs of the European Union agencies that are leaving Britain. That I don't know if that's helpful. Donald Tusk, by contrast, has contributed to the conversation with the following little nugget. We all know that breaking up is hard. Breaking up and building a new relationship is much harder. Thanks, Donald. Steve, and actually, just to paraphrase Neil, I think he was describing what we could loosely term the build the wall contingency. Because whether you're talking about Trump or Brexit, you never know how many people were holding their nose and voting for slightly more nuanced reasons, or just kind of, leaving their brain at home and shouting, build the wall. That's the problem you got, because it seems to me that the hardcore Brexists now are the build the wall lobby, which has always seemed to be a profoundly un-British position to adopt. Steve's in Reading. Haven't we had enough Steves today? What would you like to say, Steve?
Well, I'm considering blaming Lily Allen, but I don't know if it's fair, really.
No. Who else? Who's on there? Jamie Oliver. No, he was all right on this. Well, I don't know. Go on.
It's a complete mess. I mean, I've phoned him before and I voted to leave. And I'm disappointed I did that, but the whole thing is a complete mess. I mean, it is an absolute mess, and I genuinely don't think, because of the rhetoric and everything that's gone on for so long, being the nation we are, I think everyone is the majority are genuinely sick of it and moving on to other things, without realising the absolute disaster I think this is going to turn out to be.
Well, I've got a personal problem here, Steve. You can help me out a bit, because, I'm not going to yet, but I can feel myself moving slightly towards the position that Neil in Toaster just described, which is accepting the inevitability of it and trying to minimise the harm. The problem is that my motivation for banging on about this incessantly, and I honestly, I know people don't believe me, I derive no pleasure whatsoever from being proved right about almost everything. Even that sounds cocky, but I just have to say it occasionally, because it's true, it's awful. I wish I was wrong. But the people that told these lies will target the NHS and the welfare state next. So unless you keep pointing out the lies, which will always sound like you're still campaigning to go back in or to stay in, I worry about the future of those two fantastic institutions which really are at the heart of the existence of ordinary working people.
I completely agree. I think, people are focused on almost the minor issues of like immigration, because this country will always need people coming in, skilled, unskilled, so in some cases, will need people coming into this country.
And what might be the final chapter of this part of the saga will be when we need people to come into the country and they ain't coming. Uncontrolled mass emigration could be the watchword for 2019. That's it from me for another week. Thanks ever so much for all the kind words. And for Sam and Steve, all the cross ones. We'll do it all again Monday morning from 10. Have a cracking weekend. Give your family a cuddle. Remind yourself what's good about life.